Right, welcome to episode 144 of Retro Power and Cut, and I'm back from Lemans, and Nat is on holiday, as is Jamie. So George is behind the camera, unusually, and I'm going to attempt to edit this video, so it's probably going to be incredibly basic. We won't have any B-roll on it, B-roll being the extra little shots we chuck over the top, for those who don't know video editing jargon, because Jamie's not been here getting them. So we're literally just going to shoot this video. I'm going to give you a walk around of what's been going on this week, and then at the end I'm going to drop a little footage that I captured in Lemans, which was a fantastic weekend. So in the workshop, I'm actually going to start with this because we had two projects arrive this week. This being the second of the two Allegro projects. Now, Nat obviously hinted at this last week because we showed the arrival of the second Integra donor car. And then this week, that's already stripped down. You saw it blasted last week. It's now just sitting thrown onto the jig bed over there, ready to have all the upper part cut off and be properly jigged. The Allegro arrived, I think, on Tuesday. I thought this was going to be the worst of the two Allegros, I have to say, because it kind of looks like it looked like it had been painted. I'm still not 100% sure whether it has or not, but as we've stripped it down, it does look remarkably good. So I actually think this, if anything, might be better than the first one, which is good news. So we've got this all stripped down. Next step on this is going to be cutting out some of the stuff that we don't need, cutting out the floor pan because it's easier to blast it with no floor pan in. We can get to more of the areas that do need cleaning up. And then we're going to get this next week ready to be blasted, and then we can start doing the more precision cutting on this and on the floor pan and working towards getting the two together, which obviously is at the stage this one's at. And Bobby's now working on the inner wing area. He's been making these little infill pieces at the front here, each side on the inner wings. Just simplifying this area on both sides. It used to have the ABS module over there, which it's not going to have anymore. So we're sort of jointly deleting a load of holes and bracketry for things that we're not going to have anymore, and also cleaning up this area of the inner wing and making it come out where it will mate with a seal to the inside of the new carbon outer wing. But also creating a gap in this area here, because where the indicator side light units used to once sit in the Allegro, they're going to be air intakes. This one I'm not sure 100% of the function yet, but that side there's going to be an air intake that then leads to a moulded pipe going through the engine bay that will feed cold air feed to the throttle bodies, which also incidentally have arrived this week, the Gen V throttle bodies we're going to be using on the Honda B series. So that's where Bobby's at, and he's making the wing mount rails down here at the minute. There's going to be a closing panel that just sits in here. I think, as we've mentioned before, it's remarkable how close the body shapes are on the two cars. So the curve of the wing here is so close to the curve of the Honda inner wing that these sort of infill panels that we're making are actually remarkably small. Prior to starting on this bit, I think he was helping Scott at the rear end. We're looking at the rear seat installation in the parcel shelf area. So Scott finished his strengthening work, extending the structure of the C-pillar down and joining it into the inner arch tubs of the Integra floor pan. He's prepared, I don't think it's welded in yet, but he's going to be putting a cross tube in as well that braces the shell across and forms the structure that the front of the parcel shelf will mate up to and that the seats will angle back onto. And actually it looks like we're going to be able to use the Integra rear seats completely as they are. Because the Integra door cards kind of bulged in quite a lot, although the Integra was slightly wider overall, they're amply narrow to fit within the confines of the Allegro shell. So I think we're going to use the Allegro seats, the Allegro seat brackets and latches, and all we're doing is putting a crossbar across where they naturally clip into place, and then extending the parcel shelf forward with a new design that comes all the way through to that bar. It's going to mount the speakers in the parcel shelf. We're going to roll some ribs into it to stiffen it, but it's kind of continuing to fall into place reasonably well. So yeah, all going in the right direction on that. And actually, talking about this car and looking at the wheels sticking out, George has been on with the revised bodywork. So obviously the car is going to need to be wider. In fact, we're planning on it being wider than normal Integra. These wheels have been spaced out by 30mm versus the normal Integra because visually we want a reasonable amount of dish on the wheels. It's having mini-light style wheels and they always look nice with a bit of dish to them. So to try and, we've kind of thrown a compromise between it looking cosmetically pleasing with the dish on the wheels and not having a massive amount more offset on the front. From a drivability point of view, the more offset and more screw radius you have, it's not going to feel as good as a front wheel drive. More torque steer essentially. So we haven't gone crazy with it. We've gone enough offset to clear the brake calipers, which I think's ended up about ET20 on the front. Well, it's ET20 all round. So we've mocked that up by spacing those wheels out, and then George is in the process at the moment of modelling the wide body, which is looking pretty good. It's certainly going in the right direction. There's always that nervous phase where you've kind of got in your mind how it'll look, and we've had some two-dimensional renderings done a while ago. But it's when you start converting that into 3D, you can sometimes find there are areas that get very complicated to actually make into reality, but it seems to be coming together pretty well. So watch this space on that, and that's edging forward to actually being able to create the mould tools for the carbon panels straight from the CAD, which is slightly nerve-wracking. Right, E-Type. Sam's working on this. I think last week we were just talking about getting it properly jigged. We made a call. We were going to do the floor pans and originally not the sills, but then we started thinking, well, we don't quite know what's lurking in the sills, although they look good. And we'd like to take the opportunity actually to strengthen it up a bit more. So we thought actually it makes sense to just do the sills as well. And that was the kind of tipping point from it not being fully jigged to, yeah, we need to fully jig it. So Bobby and Sam got this completely jigged on the Select jig base very end of last week, early this week. And then we've opened up the sills, and Sam's working on some strengthening in the sills. So we've run a 4-inch tube down there. We were thinking for quite a long while how to tie that all the way end to end without interrupting the diagonal braces that add a huge amount of strength from the bulkhead area down into where the torsion bars bolt into the floor, and then at the back it ties the sort of upper sill structure down into the area where the rear subframe and the trailing arms mount. So we didn't want to really interrupt those diagonals by running a tube straight through them, because essentially you then got a tube that's actually under compression by the triangulation, which would kind of deform quite easily. So we decided to actually end the tube on the side of those pieces, which allowed us to plug weld from inside, because they had big round access holes on them originally. Plug weld in the ends with the tubes capped off. Add another bit of tube in the front that ties the bulkhead where the subframe mounts into that triangulation point. Then, after we'd plug welded that all through and seamed around the ends of it, panel off the triangulation access holes, and then we're going to do some little fillets that kind of bring the shape of that tube onto the outer face of those triangulations as well. So, should be extremely strong, I think. And then once we've done all that, new sills will go on, and the new floor pans can go in. So it's all going in the right direction. I think Sam's pretty much buttoning up this side, then we can start on the other side, and yeah, we're going to have decent floor pans and a lot more structure than there once was. So that's where we're at with that. I've already mentioned that. Last week, I think Nat ended at the point we were about starting the blasting of Project Kuma, the second of the pair of Mark I Escorts. Since then, so it was blasted, it was zinc metal sprayed, there's loads of videos about that. People have actually asked a few questions about the blasting. Now, if you look at our autofocus series, we talk about some of the techniques that we use, and there is an episode about media blasting. I think there's an episode about the zinc spraying, or it might be mentioned in the same one. But it's just a method we use to add a lot of corrosion resistance to the underside of the body shells. And then it's been epoxy primed, and then the guys have cracked on with the prep work. So they're sort of in the initial filler block sanding stage of the bodywork on it. And yeah, that's as we know from the many bodywork episodes we've done, that's basically how bodywork goes: putting material on, sanding it off, and repeating that until it's perfect. So let's move on into here. Right, so Utah, I'm just waiting. We mentioned about oil pressure sender failure on that, so I'm just waiting for a replacement on that at the moment. It should hopefully be here tomorrow or early next week, and then we can crack on with some remaining bits on that. I mentioned there was 2 arrivals this week. Second one is this, which is the latest donor car for the Redux M3s. Loads of information online. We don't go into huge detail about the Redux M3 projects, but they're an exceptionally ambitious project, incredible end result actually. The Redux number 2. Number 1 was nothing to do with us. Number 2 was the first one we've done from the ground up, and it's probably one of the best driving cars I've driven. So it's a really exciting project. So yeah, we've got the donor car here, about to start stripping that down. Mark 1 Escort. Different prongs of attack going on. Anthony's been on with a lot of the subframe build-up stuff. So we got our batch of Xylan plating, or Xylan coating I should say, back, which had a lot of things like the compression struts, lower track control arms, lots of parts like that. We got the crossmember and subframes back from being blasted, zinc metal sprayed and powder coated. So Anthony's been on with building all that up, building up sub-assemblies. So he's assembled the hub carriers with the hubs now, front and rear I think. He's got all the poly bushes fitted on the subframes, he's got the poly bushes fitted on the control arms. And we're kind of getting all of those sub-assemblies together with a view to getting that rolling, which is going to be pretty imminent actually. I'm just waiting for a pair of wheels which should be here next week. We need to then prep and paint the wheels for it, get the tyres on, and I think that will coincide quite well with getting those sub-assemblies together. So we're not very far away from getting that rolling, and then we kind of other prongs of attack going on in other areas of just getting all the parts together. We're going to start dynamatting that soon. We'll dynamat it, wax oil it all, and then we're going to be close to a position where we can get the wiring in, and that's where Alex comes into play. So Alex is, over the last few weeks, been working on the design work for the wiring harness in that. Basically planning out the materials that are going to be used throughout, the connectors that are going to be used, speccing everything, doing all of the data sheets for things like senders and all of the electrical components. Basically we do a data sheet for each component that gives you all of the pin outs for that component, a diagram of a wiring diagram if that's relevant, part numbers, and so we've all got all that stuff on record, saved against that car, not only for future reference if we ever work on the car again or if the owner wants somebody else to work on the car, but also it's handy reference for the next project we do. We can say, oh yeah, we use this component, pull up the data sheet for it from our records for this car, and it's ready to go. So we're all going in that direction, and actually the wiring harness build table, which I think we mentioned we were doing as we set up our wiring area, is almost nearly done. I think Rich is above me at the moment just doing the finishing touches of getting the gas struts on that. So we've got this massive table that Alex has designed and built with Rich, which is got this quite cool motion because we wanted it to go vertical or horizontal. But if you just have a central point that it pivots around, when you have it at a sort of nice working height horizontal, you end up with a lot of it very low, like by your feet when it's tipped up. So they've designed this table that kind of slides across. It's got a cable and pulley system, so as it comes up, as it flips up this way, it also slides up higher, which is pretty cool. And I think they're just putting a gas strut on it, so it kind of assists the lift of it. So yeah, that's the wiring department. That's what's going on with the Escort at the minute. The Morris, we were tackling this a slight oddity with the brake pedal feel on it. It just sort of pulses slightly or resists slightly and then goes again. And I thought it was a delay in the vacuum assistance. It's running a dual circuit remote servo. So we put a vacuum reservoir on it, which seemed to improve it slightly, but not vastly. So we've just been going through a few other things, and we've actually replaced the entire remote servo unit. And it's exactly the same. We've chopped and changed a couple of one-way valves in the vacuum system, and it's exactly the same. So I'm pretty much coming to the conclusion that that's just how those remote servos feel. It's not really detrimental. The brakes are absolutely fine, and you completely get used to the feel of it. It's just for the first time you drive it, you think it was a bit strange because it's sort of your pedal seems to go, resist slightly, and then go again if you're sort of really analysing the feel of the pedal. But yeah, I think we're just going to be on with test driving. Now I'm happy that there is no fault with that system. I think we're good to go on that. The Mustang is back in. That's now back in for its kind of post-shakedown snagging list, if you like. So as with all the cars we hand over, they initially go over considered to be done, safe, but there'll always be a little snag list of things that we might not have missed, or we might not have spotted, sorry. So that's come back just with a couple of little things. The most annoying one is that the driver's door latch randomly just decided to sometimes work and sometimes not. So Gibbo's just been looking into that. I think it's actually a fault with the actual latch unit itself. So looking into that, and then there's just a couple of little nitpicking things on it that we're going to work our way through. Nothing major, so yeah, it's good to have that back in here. Can't wait to get that back to the owner again. And what else have we been on with? Probably the notable thing to go over actually is some more Escort stuff. The design, Luke's been working on quite a lot of component design for that. So we've got the mirrors, the door mirrors, which are looking really good. We wanted like a bullet style mirror, but to add a bit more flair to it, and we're going to do our own version where it's actually got pivoting glass within it, because I've got bullet mirrors on one of my cars and you basically can't see anything in them, and there's not enough adjustment. So we're going to do our design so the end is not flat backwards, it's actually chamfered and a different angle one side to the other to give you most of the correct angle, and then the glass will be on a ball joint within the housing rather than a swivelling part on the front like a normal bullet mirror. So we're trying to tackle the functionality and the cosmetics in one. What else has he been on with on that? Struggling, handbrake grip. That was a pretty basic job on that, just a machined handbrake grip. So he's done the drawing of the model for that. George, what else has he been on with? There was something else major I was thinking, but maybe it was Allegro stuff. So he's been on with the C-pillar vents. That's one of the things on the Allegro project. There's a few components we're designing on Allegro. So the entire grille, headlight surround assembly is one thing. The C-pillar vents, the little vents in the air dam, they're all kind of nods to the original, but because the originals are, you know, I don't know, what age are those things now? They've got to be 40, 45 years old maybe. So we don't really want to use 45-year-old plastic components. Even if we could get good condition ones, I'm just not comfortable with it on a sort of build of that level. So we're doing machined aluminium parts, and that gives us the opportunity to inject a bit of our own design flair as well. So on the front, we've got a grille design that's quite similar to the original Hex design, but we've kind of stylized it a bit more, and then we're designing our own headlight bezels to integrate kind of modern headlight units, and then the lower valance part, the grills if you like, were originally just slats, but we've kind of introduced the Hex design to that as well. And then on the C-pillars there was a basic metal vent piece there, and we're trying to integrate some elements from elsewhere. So we're putting a single Hex on that as a nod to the Hex on the grill, and Austin kind of writing on there again as a bit of a nod to the front grill, so it kind of ties everything together a bit more visually. I think actually that is probably, there's things I probably will have forgotten, but trying to remember the whole lot is a bit of a challenge for me. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to answer a couple of questions. So first one is Mike Buckley 5072. I thought you employed somebody to do the looms now, yet the Camaro loom is being done externally, question mark. Yes, simple reason for that. It's just the engine harness, and it's an LS3 harness, and there are a lot of places in the States that their entire business is based around doing LS3 engine harnesses. Obviously we'd have to get to grips with what all the connectors are, how it's all wired, and kind of design the loom, which would end up costing the customer way more when actually their company is already making them to a pretty high standard to your dimensions. So I've just supplied dimensions to, I think it's Spear Tech, I'm probably going to be wrong about that now, but I think it's Spear Tech, for the different legs of the loom, and they're going to make it, and it's just going to be, I think it's like $1,000, $1,200, something like that, which would be a fraction of what we would have to charge designing it from scratch as well. So actually this one almost ties in with something I was just saying. Are you going to run 750HL Allegro twin headlamps or the boring square headlights? This is Neil Perry 2224. So actually, I was just talking a minute ago about the fact we're designing our own kind of front grille and headlight surrounds. We are going to be using Hella LED projector units, and then we're doing a machined aluminium housing that they will sit in, which kind of adapts the shape to a square or rectangular shape, very similar to the original rectangular sort of shape, with an aluminium bezel, and that will sandwich in a vacuum formed polycarbonate lens that we're going to have over it. When I say lens, it's really just a cover, just clear. The projector unit does all of the beam pattern work. So it will effectively have a rectangular light, but it's housing a modern Hella LED unit. That's that. I'll go one more. So Ben Buchanan 672, we get snippets of insights into your customers. Well, I totally admire their creativity, vision and commitment. I'm not sure I envy them. You mentioned before about people who use their cars when in the UK, and obviously I talked about the Volvo going into storage until much time as the owner can use it. much as I'd love to commission a retro power build, there's a part of me that loves being able to pop out to the garage and tinker and head out for a blast on a whim. Do any of your customers do that? Well, yeah, they do. I mean, certainly one thing that links them all is they're all petrol heads. They all love cars. They're having these cars built to drive them, but obviously some of these guys are running big businesses. They don't all live in the UK. Got a lot going on, so it's not necessarily a case that they can drive them on a regular basis, but they, you know, invariably look forward to the opportunities when they can drive these cars. So although a lot of them are kept in storage, it's a big event when the customers are able to go and get them. A bit like you talking about being able to get the car out the garage and go for a blast. For them, it's very similar to coming back to the UK and getting the car out of storage and going for a blast. They're not accessible at short notice. So it's fair to say that all these guys love just going for a blast. Some of them certainly are at sort of tinkering with the car levels as well, perhaps a smaller percentage. So yes, although I get where you're coming from, it seems sort of a shame that quite a lot of these cars aren't used day in, day out. They're certainly something that the owners massively look forward to having the opportunity to drive, so it's nice to see that. Good example being Utah, which I notice as we've been working on it, has 2,000 miles on it now, so as a sort of occasional use weekend car, I don't think that's too bad going. Right, I think on that note I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to introduce the video footage that I managed to capture at Le Mans.
Sick whip, yo.